Giving up the things in our lives that give us a break from our daily struggles or makes them a little easier definitely sounds like a questionable strategy for life. We're already feeling mentally and or physically drained and we want to let go of the threat of reality for a bit or just experience a quick neurochemical reward for doing something not difficult that also gives our senses a positive little jingle. Most often, we prefer to do both at the same time. Coming home and putting on a TV series or sports, grabbing some salty, fatty, sugary snack or beverage from the fridge, or maybe heading to the bar to try to alter your own reality enough that you feel some disconnection from the usual. Or hell, even going to the gym and doing a bunch of physical labor that we're usually trying to avoid in our everyday lives. And many other strategies we have to get away from our lives. And none of that stuff is necessarily bad. Some of it can even be good for you. You can't just put a blind value judgment on anything because it really depends on everything else. You have to be the honest judge of your own life. But if you're going to be honest, then how do we know that it's not bad for us when we're knee deep in it? That's the really tricky question. Absent obvious signs of dysfunction that still might not be obvious to you as the actor, I'm not sure it is possible to know whether it's good or bad when you've already bought into a behavior. That's where going without comes in. You have to test certain things in your life periodically and find out. That both sucks because someone can't just tell you the answer about what's the right choice for your life, and is also amazing because when you embark on consciously chosen personal experiences, you've cued yourself to see the differences. All those emotions, thoughts, feelings that come up that were previously hidden by your habit, you feel them in sharp definition and have the opportunity to better understand something about your life. That's why the doing is always so important. You get a fuller experience of the thing you previously only thought you understood. Lawrence Gonzalez wrote in his book Deep Survival, "We think we believe what we know, but we only really believe what we feel." Think about that quote a bit in terms of your own day-to-day actions. And if you enjoy practical psychology, I highly recommend that book. We most strongly learn to believe what we feel through experience. You can experience reading or listening to something and feel strongly about it, and that knowledge or idea becomes encoded in your identity. But we also may have the strongest feelings about things that reinforce what we already believe. And that's why just reading about things is a bit dangerous. You're too separated from the limits of reality. But if you actually experience the thing in its physical form, whatever that is or takes shape as, if you and your emotional feeling body have an experience with that thing according to the principles of reality, then there's a real chance for you to believe something new, something that you couldn't have believed just by reading or listening to it. Doing has the possibility to change your belief, and belief has the possibility to change your actions. Knowledge is not belief. Beliefs are the actions you actually take. Knowledge is information you acquire to try to figure out what the best actions are. Lots of people have loads of knowledge about things that don't factor into the actions they take at all. Think about that. We have to be critical of ourselves in terms of how we talk about and understand the way we're processing our lives. We have to believe in what we do, or else we won't do it. Knowing, believing, and understanding that can change your life drastically, not only in how you approach trying to implement real changes, but in how you can empathize with yourself if you fail to implement changes. Knowing that you failed to do something because you don't really believe in its relevance for you can be eye-opening. It's a completely different perspective than believing you're not able to do what you think you know. We don't do what we know. We do what we believe. Our common vernacular of knowing something is just knowing information. It's not the knowing of integrating our knowledge into our beliefs, which become our actions. I can know eating too much sugar is bad for me because it doesn't match my body's energy needs. But if I still believe in the overall positivity of the sensory bath I get when I eat something sugary, then that knowledge isn't connecting to my actions. We missed part of the process. My own emotional encoding of these eating experiences is still giving me the feeling that leads to eating the sugar. The emotional encoding into a feeling is the belief. Don't fight the reality of this design. Don't go against those first principles of the game you're playing. Work with the foundational rules of the game and you will get better results. It might only be one tool in a successful strategy, but I promise you it's a powerful one because it's very close to the foundational principles at work. A first principle of the strategy for going without presumes that we even can go without. And if we find we're not successful at doing that, isn't that something that we want to consciously consider about ourselves? It's okay to have weaknesses, and it's okay to admit that to yourself. Having weaknesses doesn't make you weak. Knowing our weaknesses makes us stronger, and so does improving our weaknesses where they're in conflict with our strengths, even if it's just incremental and seems like a small improvement. At some point, we can't get stronger without addressing our weaknesses. And if we're not aware of them, then we have nowhere to go. Not being honest with ourselves about what we need to improve is not a good strategy. Going without is important because few things in life are simple, and it's not always clear what's working and what isn't without such a stark change in our experience. Once you have sufficient belief in its importance, going without becomes an extraordinarily insightful experience. If you give up sugar in its most hyper-present forms for a period of time, let's say a month, and then come back and try it again, you'll notice just how sweet it is compared to what your new normal baseline for sweet is. You probably couldn't understand that just by cutting back the amount of sugar you were eating, but paradoxically, you also couldn't understand that while you had given it up. There's always two parts to a magic trick: when you take it away and when you bring it back. You might have noticed some of the impulses to have or want sugary treats when you gave it up, but reintroducing it to your life and reevaluating its effects when it's not just a normalized experience is like seeing something for the first time. You suddenly get smacked in the taste buds by just how sweet it is, and maybe you're shocked that you sense some craving for such a sweet treat again a day later. Maybe you forgot how real that craving was when you hadn't experienced and normalized it away while you were eating sugary treats regularly. At least that's been my experience. The only way to know your experience is to try it. Same thing for coffee. If you give it up, you may feel some of the side effects. For me, I get a headache and just generally miss the stimulant. But then it becomes normal to not drink coffee. And when you have one again, if you wait a month or so, let's say, you're going to suddenly realize how powerful of a stimulant that it is. You can freshly decide what you think about that experience, just like you can freshly decide how you feel about the sugary treat experience. My experience with sugary treats and a few other food items have over time made me believe more and more strongly that they aren't in the best interest of my design for my life. Whatever kick they give me in the moment works against my goals in the longer term. And that's not to say I don't ever eat them or get back in the habit of eating them every day. It's just that when I do, the negative part of the experience becomes clearer to me sooner and I tend to hop off the habit quicker. That's an incremental progress over many years, decades. In my own life, I've succeeded better with limiting sugary things than coffee. I sometimes get in the habit of buying an afternoon cinnamon bun to have with a cup of coffee, which is a common treat in Sweden, but I usually will only do it for a week before I feel it's not really a habit that's worth it to me. Coffee, on the other hand, I've rarely succeeded in limiting once I start drinking again. I have gone periods of time being completely without, but almost never do I meaningfully limit it while I'm drinking it. I remember one brief period where I would only drink coffee on the weekend mornings, but that did not last. I still don't believe that my life is better without coffee than with, and I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. I should be more sure about something that I consume every day and have such trouble quitting, but I'm not. If I'm honest with myself, that's an easy way out. I can put that on my list of ways in which I suck and not be blind to it and make some incremental progress on it. The ways in which we suck is kind of a harsh way of saying things, but it's my way of making light of tough things by just being super direct about it. I talk about it more in other videos. These dopamine hits and escape plans are hard to confront. We mentioned escaping to the bar or into a TV series, but you can also escape to faraway places in a video game or book and more energy intensively with a car or train or plane. Escapism and quick hits are massively prevalent in our lives. We don't want to sit still. When we're not actually doing stuff to survive and reproduce, then we're looking for some kind of feedback from our body that we're doing the right thing. But it's so hard to know what's good or bad for your life based solely on what you get in the moment. And because of how incredible our psychology is, the results you see might totally shock you. Maybe making a conscious decision to remove something from your life that you believe is bad actually allows you to give yourself permission to have something you always wanted but didn't believe you were worthy of. Your ability to have the new thing can really have nothing to do with the thing you gave up at all. Nothing, except possibly your own perception of yourself as being deserving. That's fucking crazy. We're fucking crazy entities. But that's the power of working on yourself as well as the world we live in. That's why you have to do stuff, because it has consequences you can't always predict. And you get feelings that you can't manufacture the same way just in your head. At least not until you understand the experience. And going back to Stephen Covey, to know you must do. How we consume coffee and sugar might be the smallest of problems in the world, but they're also super common. What kind of benefits could we get by fixing the stuff that's right in front of us? Maybe we gain the experience and confidence to take on bigger problems in our lives. Or maybe they aren't problems at all, and they're critical parts of the human experience in our culture when we use them to come together and connect as people. I'm not against coffee and sugar. I'm against us not having a vision for our future as individuals and as a society. That is where we can make better judgments on what's a problem and what isn't. How much of something is good and how much is counterproductive. We need something to design for. Going without a design in our lives is a good experiment to run. You can watch the movie Yes Man for an overly fictionalized and ridiculous example, but we have to be able to compare it to a control. And you can't design your own life when every little moment where your senses aren't being tingled makes you itch for distraction and disconnection from yourself. Life is hard work, but it gets easier when we go without stuff that isn't meaningful to our mission or that supports our values. What you choose to believe changes you. Be considerate about what you believe, and at times go without your belief and see what knowledge you gain.